Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, one and all. Thanks for joining us in this episode of BRM BrownBag. This is episode number 31. I'm your host, Suresh GP, and I'm joining you from Melbourne, Australia, and we have a special guest today, Sarah Fogg, who is from the UK, a master BRM, and also a member, the board member of the BRM Institute, joining us for a very special topic today that you will all love to hear. And thanks, Sarah, for making time. She's joining us all the way from United Kingdom, and it's been lovely to catch up with you always as a BRM practitioner and now a trainer and a coach. Fascinating. How has been your journey in this BRM, and what really prompted you to come into the world of business relationship management?
I started my career working at Mars, the chocolate company, and they had a really positive talent management policy. So everyone was moved around different roles every couple of years. So after being there for 12 years, I'd had six different roles, all in IT. And I realized that the roles I really enjoyed the most were the ones that were connecting IT to business outcomes. I took a redundancy package from Mars and went off on a ski season and traveled through Thailand and Australia
Right.
for a while. And then when I came back, I actively looked for BRM type roles. So I've been doing BRM roles for a couple of decades actually now. The last 10 years being sort of head of BRM type roles. And I've worked in different industries and always found different contexts, and it's just an endlessly fascinating and powerful role to have. And then April last year, I took the plunge to go freelancing. So as you said, I'm now a coach, consultant, and trainer in all things BRM. So CBRM, BRMP, etc. And I also volunteer on BRM communities. So I'm very active in the UK community, and I also lead the European community. And all those are volunteer roles. And as you said, I'm vice chair on the BRM Institute Board of Directors as well. And that's part of my passion to give something back. I'm really passionate about the power of the BRM role. And now I'm doing it in a freelance capacity in a different way, so enabling other people to be successful in BRM and furthering the profession that way.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Today's topic for this episode is about personal resilience in the business relationship management role. I found this to be very, very important and integral part of every BRM, because most of the times we have seen as business relationship management roles struggling to prove their words to business, and in terms of sometimes it's a thankless job. You do all the hard work, and someone says that, oh, okay, the team did it. And if something gets goofed up, we just get blamed. Okay, blame it on the BRM. They didn't do a good job. So,
Yeah.
and you have gone through this whole grind in terms of the 2 decades that you have spent on BRM, and I'm glad that practitioners like you come there and consult and coach, because you have been in the trenches. So when you say
Mm.
something about it, people understand where you come from. But help us understand, why did you pick up this topic on personal resilience in the BRM role, and what are some of the triggers that went in that space?
I think the BRM role is an incredibly powerful one and impactful one. And in order to be successful at it, you need to be putting your personal energy into it. And the relationships that you build and the partnerships you build, they're very personal. Otherwise, they're not proper relationships or partnerships.
Right.
And so sometimes you need to be a little bit vulnerable to build those partnerships. You're putting a lot of your own personal self forward. And if you don't protect yourself with some resilience, sometimes you can feel like you're losing some energy. It's exhausting to invest energy in other people.
Right.
But if you don't do that, then it doesn't work. So somehow you need to give the energy and then protect yourself as well with a bit of a thick skin.
Yeah. No, no,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And how do you define the word resilience? Um, and how do we interpret in the context of this is relationship management of why resilience is an important piece?
Yeah, so I guess the dictionary definition would be something like the ability to recover from shock or change or misfortune. But in terms of BRM, I think we need to think of it about having emotional strength.
Right.
So making sure we manage our emotions effectively. We need mental fortitude, so a positive attitude, a positive outlook. And we absolutely need flexibility, being able to adapt to change. All those things are absolutely key to the BRM role. Um, I remember in the 90s, football commentators kept talking about bounce back ability as if
Right.
that was a word that
Right.
they'd put back together. And a BRM will take knocks at times, and you need to be resilient to that and being able to take that and turn it into something positive, a learning experience. So it's about withstanding stress and being able to grow and thrive, and having the right amount of stress that you are able to make an impact, but protect yourself as well.
And this is a very important part of resilience, but particularly with the COVID. And there's a lot of times life throws a lot of curveballs, and you can actually need to adapt and adopt, which is easy said and done. And from a personality standpoint, a lot of people are stuck with the same fixed mindset. To kind of
Mm.
challenge and get challenged becomes a lot more overwhelming for that. So, is there any kind of personality traits that you think is important to bring in that level of resilience aspect? Because I don't think resilience comes naturally for a lot of people. It is just
Hmm.
about, if you have had that experience of bouncing back in that term that you used, or looking at things that did not go well and they pulled it off, then people get to this mode of resilience. But for someone new, they kind of really don't understand resilience because they've not been exposed, or they probably have not tuned to that
Hmm.
aspect of resilience. So, any thoughts on who is likely to build that resilience, and why do BRMs need such kind of things, or if they need to change their personality a little bit to get to that group?
Yeah, I wouldn't say need to change personality, but you can change your behavior and you can choose your response to situations.
Right.
And I'm always inspired by the British triathlete Chrissie Wellington. I think she was the first British triathlete to win the world championship. And this is probably going back 15 years or more now.
Mhm.
But she had a really difficult experience when she was at training camp in Finland. And she turned that into a positive, and that experience she had there was the thing that gave her the mental toughness that in a way that no other experience would have done. And it's about having growing your confidence from the good things that happen to you in life, but then also growing your self-belief from overcoming the bad things that happen to you.
Right.
And the key thing in there is practicing a growth mindset in every situation. And you can practice in a small way by thinking of three things you're grateful for every day as a habit. That's something
So,
that I've heard of that people try and do. And sometimes it's changing your own self-talk as well. So if you just change one word, sometimes that can have an enormous impact. So I have to get up early, I have to get the kids breakfast, I have to get them to school, I have to get to work on time, I have to go through the traffic. But if you say, I get to wake up early, I get to feed the kids, I get
mm,
to go to work, that one change of a word changes your mindset. And
right.
it's practicing those things that help you build resilience and help you be able to overcome some of the more challenging things that happen in life.
And very truly said that sometimes when we change the vocabulary, your mind starts to behave very differently, as you rightly said
Hmm.
about the behavior part of it. And when we get into that part, how do you relate these resilience with the other BRM mindsets that
Hmm.
typically we talk about in a relationship-centered organization, or in a world that is moving towards Industry 5.0 and AI coming in, and there's so much deep sea coming in, a lot of these things
Yes.
and around. How do you see that the business relationship management mindset complements this whole resilience aspect of it?
Yeah, so what we talk about generally with BRM mindset is being purposeful and relationship centered and fearless and playful and those kinds of things. And I think it's really key to be able to be fearless facing into the challenges that are presented to us, to be able to be playful about these things. You need that resilience, you need that grounding, because it's really hard to be fearless if you don't feel confident and resilient. It's really hard to be self-actualized and purposeful if you don't feel resilient. And so therefore it has to underpin all the things we want to see in the BRM mindset. And as you say, the challenges that are thrown at us like AI, we need to be looking at that as something we want to embrace and bring to our organizations, but at the same time temper it with some fear actually, because
Correct.
there's lots of issues with AI that could really go the wrong way for our organizations. So you want to embrace the opportunity and help the organization understand that, but at the same time be really cautious in the way that we embrace it and move it forward.
Yeah, I
And
think
it's the BRM that can do that mindset with being fearless, but also purposeful in the way that we approach these things.
and you're right, because if you look at AI, one of the biggest challenges about ethics, right? So how are we going to play that AI with ethics is going to be important. Are you using it for a legitimate purpose? And it's sometimes scary, to say the least. But then,
Mm,
as you rightly said, to take a word of caution and see how we can manage expectations is going to be a very important dimension to do that. And particularly from a business relationship management, one of the things that I've seen, Sarah, is that a lot of times you don't get desired results immediately,
hmm
and you can be
hmm
frustrated because you put all your heart and soul into it. As you rightly said, there are a lot of personal energy that you invest,
mm,
and playing the role of an orchestrator, moving a lot of these different parts to finally get an outcome and realize that, hey, this is not working anymore, and it's very easy to get dejected. And considering that there's not a lot of people who are going to support you in this journey, so do you think that we need to have a buddy to kind of whom we can bounce back, or kind of who could render a shoulder that we can go there and check? Because frankly, it's
for
cutthroat
sure.
in organizations. Everybody is looking at what did you do today? What is the KPI? What's the business value that you're generating? A lot of pressure for BRMs to deliver value. So how do you
Yeah.
think in those situations that BRM can build that resilience aspect?
Yeah, definitely. One of the key things to building resilience is to have supportive networks around you. And that can be your family and friends, of course, and communities around you. And I'm a part of the local running club and I volunteer there as a coach, etc. Um, and that community is a really strong sense of strength for me. But of course, there's also your colleagues around you. So you need to have very strong and positive relationships with all of your IT colleagues and your business colleagues as well. And you should form an ally network within your work environment to bounce ideas off and make sure that you're doing all the right things. And actually, there are other communities as well, like the BRM communities I talked about. So sometimes our UK community will meet on a Friday afternoon and it feels like a therapy session where somebody calls out something that's happened to them, and the rest of us are like, oh, yeah, that happened to us too. And this is how we um, resolved it. Or sometimes it's like, oh, we haven't got an answer for that, but we feel for you. So it's definitely important to have a variety of supportive networks.
Absolutely. And in terms of does the resilience get built with experience, Sarah, or does it get built with expertise? Like, how do we kind of look at people? Like, do we say that people who are experienced get a lot more resilient, or is it more to fact of that mindset where, say, it doesn't matter whether you are a teenager, you're just starting your career for being into the field of BRM, or you're a veteran. How does that resilience pay with age and experience. Let's put it that way, experience.
Yeah, so as I said, life experience does build your resilience in terms of good life experiences build your confidence, and overcoming adversity also builds your resilience. So you could argue that you're not going to get there until you've had lots of experience. However, I think even younger people and even new graduates, if they've got that growth mindset from the beginning, then whenever they encounter negative experiences, they can turn them around and say, well, what have I learnt from this? Then that will stand them in good stead. And that's the way to practice. You might need to practice that if that's not natural to you in your personality. But it's something that even young people can build.
Absolutely. And who, Sarah, from your perspective, and you have gone through this whole grind here, who inspires you to build your own resilience? How, and particularly as a woman, you kind of bringing that level of energy to kind of do an uphill task of making this heard, like your voice heard when so much things are going on. So how have you
Mm.
developed your own resilience mechanism?
Yeah, so one of my inspirations actually is my 15-year-old son.
Sure.
Um, he became a football referee at the age of 14,
Nice.
and I was very surprised that he chose to do it because he's not particularly um, extrovert. I thought he would struggle, but he's now refereed over 100 games, and
Nice.
I see him um, always going onto the field of play with a presence. And that's a skill that he's learned at the age of 14, 15. And he's learned to be comfortable being uncomfortable.
Right.
Because when you go onto that field of play, you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And there have been times, of course, even though he's refereeing like under 10s or under 12s, sometimes the coaches, the managers, the parents, and sometimes the children as well, can really challenge it and not
Correct.
in a good way. And he knows that can happen, and yet he still goes there, and his love of football has brought him there, and he's reasonably well paid for it as well, which is great for a 15-year-old. So I look at him doing that and I think, well, if I'm in a difficult situation, I'm going to channel my inner referee
Right.
and I'm going to face this uncomfortable situation, knowing that it could be tricky, and find a way through it. And I'm going to use all my tools. So I'm going to try to be optimistic, see challenges as opportunities, be open to change, and even the basic things like make sure I eat well and I exercise and I have some fun in my life, and music and the right sleep. All of those things help as well. To make sure that I'm in the right positive state whenever I'm facing something that's difficult.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is part of it, right? Most of the times when things go well, we are all happy. When things don't go well, it's the discipline that we do in terms of your exercises, in terms of your workouts, in terms of your ability to have a gratitude prayer. It could be a part of giving back something to the community. So
Yes.
how do you ensure that you are able to maintain the discipline when the gets tough? We all tell about tough times do not last, but tough people do. But it requires discipline. It requires a level of consistency. So how do you
Yeah.
kind of, bring in that element when things are not really for a BRM, when things are not going well, there's so much overwhelming things happening around. How do they kind of get their feet on the ground? How do they kind of
Yeah.
navigate through this territory?
Well, I definitely make use of your supportive networks around you.
Hmm.
Um, Continue to try to be optimistic and see your challenges as opportunities. Optimism isn't always easy, like
Right,
especially if you're a football fan like I am,
right,
like your team loses like
right,
mine did last night,
right,
and you do feel upset,
right,
but you know that's going to happen, and then you know that the team are going to learn and they're going to push on and maybe hopefully get back into the playoff zone.
right, right.
um, but I think a lot of it as well is about your own self-awareness. So knowing where your strengths and weaknesses are, and then pursuing your strengths, but also perhaps sometimes you need to step back and let others lead, and being aware of situations. So I'll give you a personal example where sadly my nephew died last year. He was only 26. It was a sudden adult death syndrome. And of course, I was grieving and wasn't in the most resilient state. And so at work, I needed to go to work to be normal,
Right.
but I made sure all of my buddies at work were able to accompany me in meetings, speak up if I would normally speak up and I wasn't. And so I was able to rely on others, and I made sure I was going out running and eating well, and being supported by the rest of my family as well. And knowing that it won't go on forever as well. Like there are times when you need to step back, and that's fine. And then you can kick on again when you feel better.
Yeah, no, I think I'm sorry for the loss as well. It's tough sometimes when you go through this whole personal losses and stuff, and it's easy said then, right? Let's bounce back and the
Mm,
emotional trauma. And I think let's talk a little bit about this emotional trauma that happens when you freeze, right? There's nothing else that you can think about. And this happened for me as well. I just had come to Melbourne first, and we bought a car, and we were going through this. Immediately, we had an accident, and the car struck pretty hard on us, and that's the time that I didn't have insurance. Because I just
mm,
had moved in and other stuff. It's just going crazy. I mean, it's just overwhelming. One, you are in a different country altogether. The other one is that you don't know the rules of the game, and then it felt very hard. And so it is freaking me for about a couple of months. We have not got through this yet.
uh,
But then you realize at a point that you need to take some time off and say, okay, what do we do now, right? Things have happened,
mm.
right? Whether you like it or not, it has happened. So what do we need to do now that will help us? Well, first of all, be grateful that we are alive. You know, myself,
Yes,
my
absolutely. I
wife
was just going to
is
say
alive,
that.
right?
Hmm.
Which is very important. And we said, okay, we are alive. We will have to pay money. We'll have to do, recovery of the cost and stuff. We have to repair this one. But I said, let's breathe, right? Let's take
Hmm.
time to do that and take baby steps to do it. How do you comfort? Because
Exactly.
I get a mail from the recovery agency of that insurance and says that, hey, you need to pay off because you are at fault. And I said, but what do I do? How do I even talk about it, right? So it's a
Yeah.
very, very easy for you to kind of fumble and freeze, but then to say that, okay, I know that there was something wrong. We are prepared. Let's do it. That mental preparation to just get
Yes.
self a little bit step up can change the whole game, and you feel positive about it. And sometimes, like Dale Carnegie said, that you prepare for the worst, but the worst things do not happen. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
really
right.
something to be
One of the key things you said in there was about breaking it down into manageable steps.
right,
So having realistic goals, whatever it is.
right,
Don't be overwhelmed. Like my son at the moment, he's got his exams in June, and you'd think the world was coming to an end. So with him, I'm trying to break it down into realistic steps. What can you achieve this week, this day, this hour, instead of thinking about next June when he's got to take his exams. So whatever it is, break it down into something that feels doable. And sometimes, I said I'm a runner, but sometimes I don't feel like going for a run.
right,
And so I break it down into really tiny goals of, well, I'm just going to get my running kit on.
right,
Doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to go for a run, but I'm just going to get my running kit on. And I'm just going to open the front door. I'm not necessarily going to go out.
right, correct,
And I'll just walk down the street. I'm not necessarily going to start running. But if I just, in my head, it's just one tiny, tiny step at a time that I'm allow myself to pull back from if I don't want to go forward, then 99 times out of 100, I go for a run.
yeah, absolutely. And that's a very good part. And James Clear, in his book called Atomic Habits, talks about the
Yes.
2 minute rule,
Yes.
where you just do it for 2 minutes, whether you like it or
Hmm.
not, and then it just builds the momentum and just runs through this. That's an awesome part to do it. So, a couple of final questions is that in terms of the whole uncertainty in the market, right? So many things in terms of technology going to influence people. People are afraid about losing jobs, losing their relevance.
Mm,
Particularly the BRM jobs, it always at stake. And sometimes when the organization thinks about this is not adding value, they kind of offset the whole BRM function. They actually get people out soon. So particularly when you don't have a certainty of what is the BRM role going to be in the organization from the way that you do it, what are some of the steps that BRMs can do to protect themselves in terms of adding value as well as not being disheartened with the organizational change and restructuring, which
hmm
is not under our control? So any tips and
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been on this journey, as you know, Suresh, and there are some CIOs that absolutely get the value of BRM and they know it makes their lives easier, that ultimately having BRMs there, projects fail less often, and lots of projects are killed off before they get even started
Right.
because they're not the right ones to do, and that BRMs help to make sure everything aligns with strategy. And they totally get it. And you see a really thriving BRM program and everything's good. And I've been in that situation. And then suddenly you get a new CIO coming in who perhaps hasn't seen a mature BRM function before. And perhaps they only see BRMs as demand managers. And they're thinking, well, we don't really need that. We'll just get the project managers to do the demand management. That'll be fine. But of course, it's a very different discipline from project management.
Right.
And demand management on its own is not the whole BRM role. Um, and so when that happens, you've got three choices. When it first happened to me, I thought I only had two choices, but
Mhm.
there are three. So the first one is fight or flight. The first two, sorry, fight or flight. So I thought about leaving, and I was like, no, I don't really want to leave. I like the company, I like my people. I've built up, good standing here. So instead, I'm going to fight.
Mm.
And so I was in her face, giving her lots of information about why the BRM role was so important. And I could see her just going, la, 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 la. It wasn't, it wasn't what she wanted to hear. And she
Right.
was incredibly stubborn. She wouldn't listen. I even brought in some big guns to talk to her, like Jeff Warren, and
Right.
still, she wouldn't have it. So the fight didn't work and the flight didn't work. So then I came up with a third way of working. And that was really where the growth mindset kicked in. And I said, okay, so she doesn't want the BRM function or the role, but she does want BRM capability. She wants people to have relationship management skills and everybody to be aligned to strategy, etc. So I had 22 people reporting to me, and 15 of them, I think, were business analysts. So I set about making sure my business analysts really understood the BRM role.
Right.
And I didn't think they would take to it at first because it's a different thing. BAs tend to be focused on one thing at a time more deeply and not necessarily lifting their heads and thinking about strategy. But they loved it, and suddenly they were operating as a team, and they were talking about the strategic things that were happening in one area, affecting another area. And I saw this all happening, and they all grew as people in their career. So that was an amazing thing to see happen. And then I also was coaching my IT peers. So the enterprise architect said, I don't do empathy, Sarah. I rely on you for that. And I'm like, yes, but you can work like this and you can make sure you look at the other point of view. So gave him some coaching. And then I helped with the transformation management office and of course with my business stakeholders as well. So I was spreading the love of the BRM, but making it part of everybody's role. Um, and then I thought my role would be the sort of community of practice lead for BRM. Unfortunately, my CIO didn't see it that well. So I was going to have to leave that role and move into the transformation management office or somewhere else. And that's when I decided that I was going to leave. So that in the end, I went full circle and back to the flight option and decided to become a freelancer. But I think that story might resonate with a few people, that if you do everything you can to ensure that the role is understood and people understand it, so you do the fight. Definitely make sure all of your business stakeholders can be critical friends and you can bounce ideas off them as to what the important messages are.
Right.
And of course, your IT peers as well. So, what would it be like if the BRM function wasn't here? What would it impact you? So you can make all those arguments as I did from the IT angle and the business angle. But if they're still doing this,
Correct.
then you can find other ways to fulfill your purpose, or you can leave. And sometimes that is the right option. And leaving has just been the best decision of my life, because freelancing is amazing. I'm enjoying the freedom of it. And I'm spreading the love of BRM through people being trained up and coached and doing the consultancy. So there's always a way.
Now that's really inspiring, Sarah, about how you looked at all this option of fight, flight, the mode of looking at not giving up, right? At the end, leaving
Exactly.
leaving no stone unturned was, I think, a very
Yeah.
important ingredient, because it's easy when the going gets tough to say, hey, okay, I give up. I don't have that energy, but it's just the mental energy to reserve. No, there is a cause, because you're fighting for a cause and a purpose. Because once that is
Yes.
kind of very clear about it, it's not the BRM philosophy, it's not the capability, it's the belief that business relationship management could bring in necessary level of change in people, in the organization, in the capability. And I think that's a very powerful message to do it. Fight for your own cause. I mean, that's how Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi have fought for a cause, right? Otherwise, you think
Yes.
about it, a
Yes.
single person can make a difference. It's just because the cause was worthy, they believed in it, and the entire people followed them. So very powerful story in terms of getting to know people that don't give up, put on all the work, think through all options, exhaust all your options,
Yes.
and then find out what needs to be done. So the final question is, what are some of the key takeaways that people who are listening in this episode of the BRM Brown Bag should take away as things that they can go ahead to build resilience, right? What should they do, and what are areas that they should focus on?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is make sure you look after yourself.
Hmm.
Give yourself time to breathe. Take a breath sometimes. We all tend to work at 90 miles an hour,
Right.
and sometimes just take a breath, look after yourself, make sure you're eating well, exercising, all of those good self um self-support systems, if you
Right.
like. And then make sure you have all of your support systems around you. So your friends, family, colleagues, communities. Um, and then in your work life, make sure you understand your context. So sometimes that might mean you need to spend time, just stop all the meetings and the emails and learn about your industry, learn about your organization, because every BRM role is very subjective to its context. So no two BRM roles are the same, and the context you find yourself in is going to influence the way that you operate and how resilient you need to be. Let your good times build your confidence. And when I look back to that sort of difficult experience I just had, I have to remember that I won a bid from the electricity regulator of 150 million pounds worth of IT investment.
Hmm.
That's something that I did with my small team of BRMs and BAs
Right.
and a solution architect, right? So I remember that it built my self-confidence. And then I also overcame a number of different adversity situations in that situation. So, um, yeah, really, it's about um, facing change as a constant, withstanding the storms, riding the waves, and remembering that it's the way we react to the challenge that's important, not the challenge itself,
Yeah,
the
absolutely.
growth mindset. And this is why the BRM role is so powerful.
Right.
If we can
And I
do all of
think
those things.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons that I think encouraging people, the BRM Institute is on a world tour and they will come to different places. They're going to come to UK, they're going to come to
Yeah,
Asia Pacific. There's a lot more happening around. So one of the things, if you are a BRM and you're looking at building resilience, great narrative, Sarah, for giving everybody a practical tip of how do we go about navigating through this tough times, but also be a part of the community. I'm a part
yeah,
of the Asia Pacific leadership community for BRM Institute. So find out your own allies, find out your own support
definitely.
network, because someone somewhere has gone through this journey. So you don't
Hmm.
need to reinvent the whole wheel. You can, bounce back and share insights, and you never know. We will all embrace you with both arms and say, yeah, we are here to support you. So don't miss this valuable option. It's like an extended family that you have, isn't it?
It is absolutely the amount of support I've had and inspiration I've had from all the people in my UK community and the wider Europe community. And I've been across to the US for BRM Connect. I
Right,
met you in San Antonio.
right,
That's just an amazing experience because you got a room full of a couple of hundred BRMs,
right.
and we all have this face similar challenges, and we're all relationship driven. So it's a wonderful experience for those that can do that as well. But the communities are free, and it's why wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think BRM Institute made this choice of opening the communities for everyone. You need not be a
Hmm.
BRM Institute member. Thanks to Marlene and team. Marlene
Hmm.
have been spearheading a lot more on the BRM communities of interest. So please join your community. It could be based on geography, it could be based on industry, whatever you have. And if you have any questions, I and Sarah can help you in picking up the right community to join us. But yeah, this has been awesome. This has been fantastic, Sarah, for sharing some golden nuggets of how to build resilience as a BRM and how much it matters, particularly in this uncertainty, right? We call it as volatile,
Hmm.
uncertain, complex, ambiguous world. How do we kind of make it with assurance? But what you're saying is that breathe, right? Focus on
Hmm.
the support network, focus on things, and also preparing yourself. I think one of the things that, from my perspective, is it's not just about learning, but also unlearning, because a lot of things that have happened, what has taken
Hmm.
you so far will not take you beyond. We kind of need to unravel and say we have to unlearn a few things and then regroup ourselves and to say what should we focus on pivoting, because that will
Yeah.
change the whole game differently. That's been always a delight to do that. We can speak for hours, but thank you so much for your time today, Sarah, on telling about how resilience is very important in the BRM role. So if you hope you enjoyed on this particular part, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode of BRM BrownBag. Until that, please listen. This is going to be available on the Apple, Google, Spotify podcast as well. So you can listen there when you're playing for a gym and stuff. But also make sure that you are able to lift someone else in the rank, because everybody needs a supporting hand, and hopefully everybody will get inspired, Sarah, for making a difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suresh. It's been a pleasure.